Steel detailing. There's more that meets the eye when it comes to RFIs. Let's get into it. Welcome to What the RFI. I'm Matt Brennan, and this is the podcast all about CA. This has been a very busy week. I've been connecting with a lot of architects in the New York City, and the nice thing, encouraging thing that came from it is that work is still moving. Despite these trade wars, tariffs, and everything, and federal cuts, we're still seeing work. And again, I was meeting with another group from North Carolina. Things are moving. There's a lot of growth, which is very exciting. And today's episode is going to be another different one, involving subtrades and GCs and architects. We don't really talk about this. We haven't really talked about this on the podcast episode in that sense. And I've got a very special guest today, and welcome to the show, Adam. So why don't you tell the audience how we met, where things have been going, who you are, where do you do, before we get into it?
So my name's Adam Williams. We met through LinkedIn. I put a post on there kind of nicely ranting about RFIs, and you commented on it and asked me to be on the show, and I gladly accepted because I like to share knowledge. So about me, I am a steel detailer. I've been doing it for over 25 years, and I've been a detailer, checker, detailing manager, trainer. I've done a little bit of all that you can do in the detailing world. Currently, I'm the lead detailer at Afton Fabricating and Welding in St. Louis, Missouri.
Nice, very cool. And kind of like, for our audience, young architects setting the stage and just kind of bringing it up, like the rundown of how a standard project works. Ideally, typically it's the owner hires the architect, and the architect hires a sub consultants. In that sense, they put a job out to tender, maybe it's CM, whatever the case is. They're awarded a project with the GC, and at that point, the GC's been collecting all the bids from these sub trades, and in this case, a steel company, and then of course that steel company is probably sub trade you. Would that probably my kind of in line?
Yeah, I work directly for a fabricator. Okay. So we have an in-house detailing team, but a lot of fabricators do not. So they hire out another sub trade, which would be the detailers.
Right. So exactly. So now with this kind of particular role in this hierarchy that we've kind of visually explained is, so when you're starting to work on a job, you're working under the GC in that sense because he's hired you. And where we're going to see this episode is kind of like it's your perspective on the job versus architect versus contractor, because we're going to see it from a different light now from yours, and why the RFIs are being triggered, why what we're seeing, and at the end of the episode, hopefully we can see a clarity of how can we give you the best knowledge, the best drawings, the best specs, so you know how to do your job properly, and and just again eliminate the time from that back and forth, and that's what I'm kind of hoping to see this episode all about. So if you anything you want to add to kind of that approach in terms of how you see it from your side, because again you got the whole different perspective here than what I do.
Right. So for like me to get a question to an engineer or an architect, if I'm a subcontracted to the fabricator, that means I have to go through the fabricator, then I have to go through the GC, and then it gets to hopefully where it needs to go. So we have to follow the AISC manual here in the States. So it states that for the approval process, there's 2 weeks approval process, but there's no timeline for RFIs. So we can send an RFI in, and it could be 6 weeks before we get an answer back.
And why is that? Why is 6 weeks, give or take?
It could be. It could be. We could get them back as fast as three hours, but sometimes it takes forever, and I can't explain why.
That was my next question. What is the answer for this?
The GC is rewriting it and trying to answer it themselves, or how exactly, where that lag is. And as we all know in the industry, if you take 6 weeks to answer a question, that's 6 weeks I'm not working on your job. And in that 6 weeks, if I am a detailing firm, I may have taken another job because I can't sit on my hands for 6 weeks waiting on an answer.
Exactly.
Which then means you lost your slot, and we'll come back to your job when we can get to it.
Right. Yeah.
People don't like, but sadly, it's a reality.
Do you think it's sitting with the contractor, or you think it's because of the architect and his structural engineer, or where do you kind of think it lies? Is it, or it's just a
I really can't
combination?
answer that. I have heard horror stories of where people have sent in RFIs and engineers have stated, we've spent our budget on this job. We're not answering any more RFIs.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So now I have questions because your drawings were wrong.
Yeah.
Who's to answer? Now what do we do with this job?
100%. No, and you're right. And like, there was a few quotes that with some of the clients I've worked with, and it's like the quote was like, "Our whole goal is not to lose our money when it comes to CA," and that's the thing. Like, it is a really challenging thing from the architectural point because you've basically got a fixed fee for the whole entire job. You've allocated say 20% for 25, anywhere from kind of 15 to 25% for CAs, your fees, and then hopefully during the design development and then CD, you didn't burn it. Maybe the client, you had a really difficult client that you're constantly making revisions. Well, all that takes time, and now you just burn the fee out of the job. Then you go to CA and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't even have that fee, and that's really
Right.
tough. Or the other scenario is, hey, you did great, you were very profitable in that job, and I've been on some of those jobs, like we're rocking it. We really got it out, we got it on time, on budget, and we're on fees. And then we get a fun contractor that's looking for that extra, and they just inundate you with paperwork, and then you just start burning that fees, and it becomes a full-time career, and it should never have been that. So it you're absolutely right with how you kind of led into this conversation, a little soapbox moment I had with it. But you're right. It's if they don't have fees, but that doesn't alleviate from the excuse of not doing it. They still got to give you what you need to do your
Right.
job because it's your
Yes.
time.
So, and like some of the problems we run into, like I'd like to throw a lot of it up to, they're just bad drawings. Like
Hmm.
I'm working on a job that I sent in an RFI. It was like 4 questions, simple questions. I believe they were simple questions, and we got an entire set of revised drawings. And it wasn't just,
Hmm.
and they're like, we added all your answers into it, which is great. You gave me an updated set, except for you changed the sizes of steel. You've changed all this other stuff. And a lot of the steel on this project had to be ordered because it was specialty sizes that you can't just buy off the shelf. So
Hmm.
now it's already been rolled. We've already purchased it, but now you've changed the sizes. So now we're stuck with this steel
Hmm.
because you
Yeah.
changed it. So that in turn, as the fabricator, comes back to, you got to buy both parts of steel if you want us to use those new shapes because we ordered per your design.
Hmm. Right.
But
Absolutely.
luckily on this job, they came back and they're like, well, the original sizes were fine. And
Okay.
then now, as a detailer, you're going, well, why did you change them in the first place?
Hmm. Yeah. Are you finding yeah, that's a good point. When you bring that steel in, and like, yeah, there is a change. And I know that, of course, you guys are going to be you're going to send an invoice to the contractor. He's going to go request an extra from the architect and all that kind of stuff. Are you managed to like reuse that steel in a different job? Like, ideally, yes, like you're going to have waste because it's not going to be the perfect length. You can't really splice it. And well, I guess you
Well,
can, but
if it's a common size, yes. So
yeah.
like if we were using just a W18 by 35,
Hmm.
that's really common on a lot of jobs. But
Yeah.
on this particular jobs, it was W14 by 145.
Okay. Yeah.
In 25 years, I've never seen that size called out.
Right. Good point.
So we can't, sometimes you can sub, like if they want an 1835 and you have 1855, you can sub that in and they're okay with it. But I can't sub in a beam that's 100 pounds per foot more than the beam that they asked for.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good. Yeah. I want to like but we're going to come back to that because we're going to talk about how can we, again, as an architectural community and everything, how can we make this process better? So that's a good point about specing the right size of beam, the standard size of beams, the ones that are readily available and everything. Unless, hey, there's that one cool feature that just requires it, and the structural engineer is noting. But yeah, let's come back to the standard sizes, and just kind of like a sidebar question: what got you into this field? Like, what interest of steel detailing and stuff?
To be honest, when I got into the field, I had no clue what steel detailing was. Uh, I took drafting in high school, went to a community college, continued taking drafting there, and they had a job board. I applied to every job on the board because I didn't want to work in fast food anymore.
Mhm.
And I had an interview with the company that I started with, and I called them every day after the interview until I think they just got tired of me calling and hired me. Uh,
Hmm.
I think I just wore them down.
Yeah.
And so from then, like even when I was there, it was 4 years before I was like, I kind of understand what I'm doing. Now, I still don't know it all. The guy who trained me, still my mentor. I call him when I still have questions, and he helps me out. We get together, we play golf together now, and
Nice.
but he's still my mentor. Will probably always be my mentor, and I am appreciative of everything that he's taught me.
Yeah. No.
And so, in my perspective, I want to do the same thing. I don't really have people to train, but the world's different now. When I was learning,
Hmm.
we had the internet, but it isn't anything like it is now.
Yeah.
So I can share my knowledge on LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Or I'm also a member of a group. I'm part of the marketing committee for the NISD, which is the National Institute of Steel Detailing.
Nice.
And
Very cool.
it says national, but it's worldwide. You
Very
don't have
cool.
to be in the US to be a member. And, there's a lot of big things that they do, and they're trying to help out, trying to push steel detailing forward is what their
Hmm.
goal is. And they've been around since like 1969, I believe. So they've had their time, and now we're just continuing to build on it.
That's so cool. I appreciate it. And that's kind of like what the last episode was all about, mentorship too. And shortly after we published that one, and connected with a one group that like they create these own intranet kind of solutions that the architects put on their thing, and it's all about the mentorship, like how they kind of making your standard of practice, your SOPs, and everything. And it, again, because that is the thing, is like how can we be better? How can we communicate? For the longest time, architects didn't want to talk to each other in that sense, and having that open community. There's an app idea by itself. We'll see. but but no, it's appreciated, because it is the new generation coming in. They're not swinging hammers or anything like that. They're clicking buttons. They want to just be part of the fun, sexy stuff when it comes to it. But when it comes to the drawing of the details and everything, that's there's a lot of gaps there, and that's where individual like you're telling your story, and you're explaining these frustrations and stuff like that, and how can we be better, so we just do it once and do it right attitude versus, like I said, just over and over and ordering wrong pieces of steel, because steel's not cheap.
No. And we also have the problem in my trade of the steel detailing is nobody knows what it is.
Hmm.
You don't go to school and they're like, do you want to learn steel detailing? You go to school and like, do you want to learn architectural? Do you want to learn engineering? But
Hmm.
nobody, beyond that, it's you can learn how to weld. But where's that in between person that
Hmm.
is in between the engineering and the welders?
That's right.
And that's what steel detailing is. Like I always tell everybody, it's like we create a puzzle, make all the pieces, but then we give you the key to put the puzzle together.
Right. I love it. That's your song clip right there. That is perfectly how to explain it. That is incredible. So, and we've kind of, this is a great segue into the Steel Detailers Challenge and everything. Um, through, we kind of touched on some of the points previously, but what do you find is the common issue when it comes to the design drawings, and then kind of what you're doing when it's given to you? What is kind of like oh no, again and again and again the same problems?
A lot of it is, it seems to everybody below, once you get past the bidding phase, that
Hmm.
it doesn't appear that people like to talk. So we'll get architecture drawings and we'll get the structural drawings, and grid lines don't match and dimensions don't match. Walls are in different locations.
Mm.
And it's just
Okay.
like, are we? I worked for an engineering firm when I first started, and back then, like the architect would send their drawings over, they would overlay their drawings, and that's how they were made.
Hmm.
This is back in 2D AutoCAD,
Yep.
so a lot has changed.
A lot has
I
changed.
know
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
Revit now,
Yeah.
but it almost seems like people just aren't talking. So
Hmm.
we're getting this no coordination between the two professions. I'm
Yep.
going to call them
Yeah. You got
professions.
it. You
I
got
guess that's
it.
the best thing I can think of. Uh, and so we run into those problems. But then you get into the engineers that are drawing the drawings. Have they been to a fabrication shop? Have they been to a job site? Because they'll show a connection. You look at the connection, you're like, hey, that thing looks really good. And then we go to draw it, and it's like, I can't even get my hand in there to put a bolt in place
Hmm.
because,
Right.
tolerances, and then shipping, like, how much can you ship? Like, we can fabricate you a 90-foot long column if you want,
Yep.
but then we're going to have to permit load it. And
Hmm.
if we build it in Indiana and we have to ship it to North Carolina, that's not just one permit. That's a permit in Indiana, in Kentucky,
Right. Yeah.
every state. So
Yep.
Shipping that one piece gets really expensive.
Hmm.
So then we ask, hey, can we splice it? And that's where the RFI start coming in. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I know you want it this long,
Yeah.
but it can be a lot cheaper if you let us go
And start
shorter.
and start changing it. Are you, and with the drawings, you're typically going off the structural engineer's drawings? Are you looking at the architectural as well?
We are we as detailers, we have to look at all the drawings. So
Yeah.
we start with the structural drawings,
Hmm.
but then we are also digging into the architectural drawings. We're digging into the electrical, we're digging into the
Okay.
mechanical, because making sure everything fits. Like we have to make sure those rooftop units are going to fit where they say they're going to fit, because
Right. Yeah.
as an architect, you go, I want it in about this spot.
Hmm.
But then the structural guy comes in and is like, well, I need joist at this spacing. And like now that throws off the architectural roof plan because the joists are in the way of where they originally want.
Yep.
And BIM has helped with this a lot.
Yeah.
Whenever you do a BIM job, and BIM has also helped alleviate a lot of these RFIs, because the
Hmm.
first question almost every detailer sends out is, I need locations of all the rooftop openings and everything, because, and
Yep.
it's one of the last things we get because the HVAC guys are one of the last people hired.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And then, of course, the mechanical engineer can say what they want. They can look at the cut sheets. And then, of course, this is people in the channel know I hate alternates, because when alternates come in, that starts screwing things up too. But yeah, the more that you can coordinate during that design proposal, the better. And we were introduced, that was my last firm, we were introduced to a new client in a new region, which was awesome. And we got to, the request of the client says, can we work with your consultant? We said, sounds good. They were all AutoCAD and we were all Revit, right? So we said, sounds good. Let's work together. That's all good. We got the structural drawings, and I was, because they weren't using Revit, we modeled everything, in the structural steel and everything. And then we were bringing it in because we wanted to ensure, and you nailed it on the head when you said, Adam, like it's way better. It's coordinated, because we were looking at that. And next thing you know it, we got the mechanical drawings and we drew in most of the major big duct work, just to ensure then, like, again, guys, this doesn't work. You got a major beam and we're not going to drop that ceiling down to, 7 feet. Like, this is a public school. Like, we were open for 12-foot ceilings in these like open corridor areas. And I think the other one that was quite comical, and it was very embarrassing from the structural, but we got the structural drawings. They wouldn't tell us where things were changing. And then next thing, we're in the site meeting, or excuse me, in the design meeting with the owner, and we like took just, we looked at through the drawings. They didn't identify what was changed, and we found it, because I'd have all these different highlighting copies of their work trying to discover, and they put the beam right underneath the toilets in the washroom, and it's like, we can't have this. Like, and I'm so thankful that we were so proactive in using, Revit, and really visualizing and doing these sections every few feet when we got more and more down the detail in the CD phase, is that we caught that. Because if that was the case, like, what would you do in that last minute? The beams, and like, you guys are,
Right.
early on, like, you'd be redesigning all the interior architecture, and that's never a fun thing. Like, are you finding that you're getting those requests too, of like, hey, we need to redesign this because that beam can't work in this location, or something, like something
Like
example like that?
I've been on some BIM jobs where people are like, hey, can you move your beam 3 inches so my duct can fit through? And I'm like, I can't. And they're like, why
Right.
not? And I'm like, because my stuff is holding the building up.
Hmm. Yeah.
So that's one nice thing about being the still detailer in BIM meetings and stuff like that, is because a lot of my responses are, we probably can, but it's going to cost a lot of money, because it's not just me being able to go, yeah, I'll move that beam. That's going to be
Yeah.
me RFI in it. Then
Yeah.
there's going to be a change order, and it's just going to stack and stack and stack. And then finally, typically the HVAC guy is just like, I can just move my stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
why do we have this conversation? Like, but I understand they've got their model done. They don't want to change their model, just like I don't want to change my model.
Right. Yeah. And are you finding that you are getting involved in the site meetings, or that you kind of like kept at arm's length, because again, it's the GC contractor, they're the ones that, because again, like when we did our site meetings, like we weren't bringing sub trades into the meeting. It was just between architects, the design team, the owner, the GC. That was kind of it. The sub trades were not involved in those meetings, because it was, very, are you finding that where you're working, you're actually getting more involved in that, or is it just,
I
again,
think
your
it's a little different, like your site meetings compared to the BIM meetings,
yeah.
because when you were coordinating everything, you're modeling everything in. And then the jobs I've worked on that have been BIM jobs is there's a BIM coordinator, and then all the trades are creating models, and then those models are being coordinated with each other.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they start with the architectural and structural engineers model, but then by the time the model's done, those models have all been turned off because they're using everybody else's.
Right.
For lack of a better way of saying it, like more accurate models. Like our level of, I can't remember the words I'm trying to think of, so we can cut that part out.
Oh, it's all good.
But it's like the LOD. What's the D for?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
so like if you're looking at, say, a helicopter's view, I'm looking at an ant's view because I have to put all the bolts exactly where they go.
Yeah.
The structural engineer don't care where the bolts go. They just know I need a connection here, and I'm telling you, you need 7 bolts here. So our model is a lot more defined because it has to be.
Exactly.
So,
and you're right. And that's a good note, because it is frustrating when I've had some structural engineers do that, and I really appreciate that. Like just general, like, gusset plates or whatever, and then kind of the base plates and the bolts and stuff. Because from the architectural standpoint, if again, we know the size of the beam, the column, whatever the case is, in the drywall, we've doubled up our our steel studs to accommodate. Oh, by the way, there's fire spray on this, so therefore we got a 1-inch perimeter around there, and we know that we know the beams are going to be crossing at different angles, and there is a certain amount of tolerance that they're allowed to do that. One job we had to do a whole extra strapping because we just didn't have quite the cavity space to manage that. But same thing when you got that, the base plate and that kind of stuff. Typical structural engineers aren't modeling that in. And for structural engineers listening to this, it'd be nice if you started doing that, modeling it, and then when the architect gets it, he goes, "Oh, we've got to make this wall cavity a little bit bigger because you've got this base plate that's just protruding out," or it's whatever the case is.
Right. Like I have a buddy who's an architect. He has an architectural firm here in my hometown, and he did a job to where it all looked good on paper. It got built, and he went out and did it. And he's like, "Why is that base plate sticking out from the wall?"
Yeah.
And then it wasn't the steel detailer's fault. It was his engineer's fault. The engineer didn't look at, oh, we need to put that in the concrete. He was just like, oh, it just goes right there. And whoever detailed it didn't look at the architectural drawings, because that is something you should do. Like, do they really want this base plate sticking out of wall? Probably not. Architects are designing for visual appearance.
Exactly. It's in the details.
So do you want a 6 foot by 6 foot gusset plate in the corner that's going to stick out of your walls? No, you don't want that. Yeah. Unless it's a design feature.
And of course it's a design feature. That's how it is. We're walking around and say, "Oh yeah, owner, that's a design feature. Yeah, I like the plates being protrude."
And like, I know you had a guest on a couple episodes ago, David Longpree.
Yes. Yeah. David.
Probably butchering his name, and I apologize
David,
for that.
Yeah, Longpree. Yeah.
But he said like an architect has to have the knowledge of like an ocean wide, and I don't remember how deep he said, but my buddy said like he was taught in college that it's a mile wide, inch deep. That's how he worded it. And I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Like, does he need to know how the steel goes together?
Right. Absolutely.
But for steel detailers, we have to know how the steel goes together. We need to know how thick that 2x piece of wood is. There's a lot more to steel detailing than just the steel.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Lateral, all the different loads, everything. Yeah, you're right. And of course, you mentioned earlier about rooftop units and all that, and trying to coordinate that. All those things are really, really, really critical. So
sorry to interrupt.
No, go for
it. That was the post I posted on LinkedIn that you commented on was about, I sent off a question saying, I need rooftop locations. And they send me 100 pages of cut sheets.
Yeah.
I don't need 100 pages. I just need the one that shows the actual curbs is what I really need. And preferably, I don't even want that. I want you to take a drawing and go from this grid line to the center line of the opening is whatever distance. Yeah. Because that's all I really care about. Like, I don't care that air conditioning unit has 3 openings in it and it weighs 6,500 pounds. I just need to know where it goes.
Yeah, and
because
yeah, and it ties to the mechanical because he needs his duct work and everything, and then of course that ties to the subtrade. And yeah, again,
right.
it's like you said at the beginning, like it's communication. Guys just need to chat and communicate, and that gets us into the realm of RFIs. Why request for information is needed, and in terms of it, what are again we kind of touched on earlier, but like what are typical RFIs that you were personally issuing? And here's the caveat: what's the worst RFI that you've seen that you had to issue because it just wasn't there?
For the worst RFI, I don't know. I was trying to think of this, and I can't really think of one. I can think of one of the worst jobs for RFIs that I worked on. I was a detailing manager at the time, and we had a subcontracted detailer.
Yeah.
And per the AISC manual, it says that we're only allowed to ask one question at a time,
Okay.
unless the multiple questions deal with one thing. So, like if I was talking about a stair, I can ask multiple questions about that stair. But in an
Hmm.
RFI, I shouldn't be asking a question about a stair, a column, a ladder, because they're all different things. And if I ask about just the stair, the architect engineer can focus on just the stair questions, get
Hmm.
those answered without having to dig into everything else. So might be able to get answers back more quickly.
Right.
Now, a lot of detailers don't do that because, you know, now we're going to start racking up RFIs.
Right.
So we had a job. It was at a aluminum plant, and we had 160 RFIs on
Just on steel detailing.
just on the steel detail.
Wow. That's
So
crazy. You know how many RFIs were for the whole project?
I do not.
Okay.
At the
Wow.
time, I could have looked in Procore and seen,
Right.
but I don't have access to Procore anymore,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm
No.
happy about that.
A
Very,
lot of
very happy
architects are
about
too.
that.
They're not. Procore is not a fun
And,
program.
and,
It's
and
not
not just
designed.
Procore, just any of those types of the software. I think
Yeah.
they are great. They help the GCs out, and I'm you with part three. I'm sure helps out the architect. But as once it gets past the GCs, it's like it's being forced on everybody else. Like
Mm-hmm.
typically in our contract, it doesn't say anything about Procore, but then we get told, well, you have to do this in Procore, and it's like,
Right.
I don't have to. I can be nice and do it in Procore,
Yeah.
but technically that's not part of my contract. My job is to get you the information, and the GC's project manager is to disperse it as
Right.
needed.
Well, that's a great kind of point too. Like with RFIs and communication, how you guys are doing it, what you find's working. Is there any kind of tips that you've seen over the years? Like, yeah, you don't mention Procore, you typically probably email it. Like, how are you guys even tracking your RFIs?
I have a spreadsheet that tracks all
Yeah.
my. I don't know how my project manager does it, and I know other detailers. They just send an RFI and to their project manager and just let it go. They from there on until they get an answer, they don't think about it.
Yeah.
But me coming from being a detailing manager, I want to know where every part of the job I'm working on is,
Hmm.
and and that's just probably from years and years of doing it. How long has that RFI been out? I just why has that RFI been out for 54 days?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then that
Exactly.
lets me go, hey, why has this RFI been out this long? And then my project manager go, oh, it slipped through the cracks on me. Let me check on it. So it's just redundancy of knowing where things are.
And like as us again from the architectural point, we have monthly site meetings, and that's a check-in. And it's basically the whole point of a site meeting is to go over the issues of the day-to-day job, and look at the outstanding RFIs, look at all those things. And that's kind of our kind of quality check and everything. And of course, like I said, to deal with issues. Do you guys as a steel detailer, like again, you've got your RFIs that you're giving to the contractor, and then of course he's supposed to pass that along. Are you guys, you must be doing your monthly meetings with the contractor and going, hey, like contractor, we've got all these outstanding items. Are you doing that weekly, or what's kind of your plan of attack?
I usually, when I create an RFI, I send it to my project manager.
Yep.
I don't know how he handles it specifically. I know when I was a detailing manager, every time I would send an RFI, I would have a list of all the outstanding RFIs on there. I would say RFI number 23 was sent on this day, and then just have it so every time they got my email, they would have a checklist to go. Okay, so you guys are still looking for all these RFIs.
Right. No, exactly. Well, ultimately, you're chasing clarity and this design intent to make this happen, and
Yes,
that's you're just trying to do your work because that ties into the response impact. And you kind of touched on it. Jobs can get shelved if they're not. if the architect or the GC or wherever these kind of slipping, because at the end of the day, you're at the bottom at that sense of you're trying to get this information and get out. And if someone's not giving it to you, you're not going to sit on your thumbs.
Right. And, like a lot of detailers, and myself included, like if I could speak with the engineer, a lot of these RFIs could just be done over a phone call.
Hmm. Right.
And we're willing to have the phone call, we're the conversation, and then we will even follow up with an email to everybody that's on the project saying, this is what was discussed. But a lot of gatekeeping is done.
Interesting. So you're not really, yeah, you're not getting that interaction with the structural engineer because he's the one that you're trying to please. You're trying to get his clarity on it, and the architect's just, like you said, just so there's no massive plate sticking out in the floor or whatever. But
Right.
you're finding that more and more is there's a lot of gatekeepers that you can't go right to the source.
It's pretty much kind of been that way my whole career.
Hmm.
Some detailers are having more luck getting in, uh, because the first thing we do with drawings is when somebody gives me a set of drawings, I'm not just starting detailing it.
No.
I'm spending 2 days going through the drawings, finding all the setup for my 3D modeling software, and looking for any questions that I know need to be asked.
Yeah.
So let's get those out before we even get going on the job,
Yeah.
because that's what needs to happen so we can get the answers and it doesn't slow us down.
Hmm. And this is where I want to kind of really kind of shift the gears. We kind of talk about the challenges, the pains, the frustrations, what's ticking us off, and and again, like it impacts money too. Like that's the big ultimate thing. At the end of the day, we're doing this to make a decent wage. We're trying to get there, and it's frustrating if things are collaboration and coordination is just not working out. It is extremely frustrating because, like I said, it all ties in and ties into timelines and delays, and it's not just you being affected; it affects everyone after you because you've got the mechanical, all like you name it. So
Right.
like shifting gears here and going, all right, for the ones that are listening is how can we like we'll call this a big milestone maybe this will be a big milestone moment and making history here is like how can steel detailers and other subtrades and everything, but how can we start working together in a better way, more proactive way to ensure that we don't are littered with what 134 hour, what was that magic number you said, but like a lot of art, can we eliminate that to a point? We're always going to have RFIs, I get it, but can we do it better? What are your
I know
kind of
there
kick it
are
off?
some firms, and I think where I work, we have offered this to some of our clients also. We will look over your drawings before you submit them for bid. So you
Hmm.
could have a detailer look over them, and it wouldn't even, yeah, there would be a cost associated with it.
Yep.
But, you know, would $1,000 for somebody to review all the from a different lens to look over your drawings and save 60 RFIs? Would it
Yeah.
be worth that $1,000 to pay a steel detailing company to look over your drawings?
Right. Whether you've got the bid or not to,
Right.
fabricate
Yeah.
and do it, but just as a, upfront costs, we'll take a look at it, we'll critique it. And yeah.
And even if they don't end up with the job because it went to somebody else, maybe they're not the lowest bidder, but they could still be the ones that reviewed the drawings before bid.
Hmm. Right. And like as far as tools, what are you guys using to steel detail? Like I know it's Revit and Tekka and
We use SDS2. It's made by Allplan.
okay. Yep.
It's a 3D modeling software that has connections design built in. It's a really good program. But I know a lot of people that are using Tekla structures.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Not many people I know use Revit yet. They use Advanced Still, which Revit is slowly, it looks like they're slowly importing into Revit.
Okay.
So I think Advanced Still might go away and then just detailing done inside Revit. And then there's also programs like BoCAD, and there's a new one called HiCAD, new to the States, called HiCAD.
Okay.
And then there are still some detailers that are using 2D basic AutoCAD.
Hmm. Right. No. Okay. Yeah. Because yeah, yeah, way back in high school when I was playing, I got to do a little work program. It was with Tekla, and I was playing, and I drew a kind of thing. It took me all day to draw, like something that would probably take you like a minute to do and everything. But it was fun. It was, and like even back in high school, like I was using architectural desktop. I'm dating myself. People can do the math and kind of figure out how old I am. But yeah, it was neat kind of doing that world. But I always did believe in 3D, like in my early days. Again, even drafting 9, I was kind of playing with a 3D AutoCAD doing it. And then architectural desktop, I think I got my hands on in grade 10 and grade 11. And that's what I did all during school while everyone was just learning simple 2D. And I was already going forward with that. Cause it is so cool to, the way I explain it to my clients when I was doing my own little practice back in the day. And it's like you benefit from the pretty pictures, but I appreciate the coordination, and that's exactly what
Right.
it would allow you to do and push forward, in with that. And yeah, my experience working with the steel detailers is, yeah, you guys would give us a .ifc file. We would import that to Revit, go for coffee because it took like good 45 minutes or something just to open up the file and convert it. But it was so cool because we would drop when we got our steel shop drawings, we would always request, can we get an IFC file or a Revit file, whatever you could provide. We got it, we drop it in there, and then, I'd be at the end of the day, the structural engineers reviewing that shop drawing, but I would review it in terms of the collisions and the conflicts with mechanical, electrical. And we would just take a section box in Revit and basically do these sections every 2 feet and just going good, good, good. Oh shoot, this beam's popping through. Take a screenshot and coordinate on that. It
Right.
worked. But the question is, and this is kind of what you're alluding to, is could we start at the beginning of the process? Could we work during the design stage? And are you doing that right now?
There are some detailers are
Yeah,
working straight with engineers, uh,
good.
and there is, if an engineer is using Revit, they can export their model, and I think most of the 3D softwares can bring in that model. It might have a conversion to it, but I can bring in a Revit model into SDS2.
Yeah.
The
Okay,
problem
cool.
is I can build the model faster than I can check the model,
Right.
because we have found that a lot of times the model's done, but then, oh, these field dimensions came in. Well, we don't have time to fix the model, just change the 2D drawing.
Right. Right.
So now you're sending me an inaccurate model, or we get a model and they're like, well, here's the model, but don't use it to scale anything off of. And I'm like, then why even give me the model?
Right. And that's right. And I found that with like, again, with our younger architects, I've talked about it in the previous, is like they just don't want to dimension stuff. And it's like, guys, like it is what it is. If it's a horrible dimension, well, that's what they're gonna build it as. So at that point, when you dimension this stuff, take a second and scale it back, and it would always my personal experience would be is, do your grid lines, get your grid lines bang on to the exact dimensions you want, nice and clean, looking good. Drawing your walls, everything else is going to fall in pretty good, and then start paring down to the next thing is all the interior walls and all that, and then start snapping them too, and then we get to that final level detail where we are calling out those details and those parapet details and all those all those little things and taking account, because it is what it is. Like you just can't get away with it. So can we make those dimensions clean? Let's do it.
And sometimes, like architectural wise, we could use a little more dimensions.
Yeah.
Like if you have a canopy that has polycarbonate panels on top of it, I don't know how thick those are, but you're dimensioning to the top of that polycarbonate panel.
Yeah.
Well, how far is it from the top of that panel down to the steel that I need? Because,
Right.
and even the engineer's not telling me it is there. The one big issue I think we need to get rid of is C structural and C architectural.
Yep.
Because usually when you see that, neither one of them have the answer.
hmm We had
So
yeah, you're touching a nerve on this one, because we had a policy in our office that was very much about that. We didn't say see, we said refer and that, but a lot of it was such a dangerous word. And one of the colleagues and the partners of the firm, we would walk into the meeting, and that's exactly what the first thing we said. There is none of that. There is no see, there is no refer, because if the structural engineer called up this and said refer to architectural, well, architectural missed it, it's 100% extra. We can't do anything about it when it came to the contractor. But if structural just said, beam, or architect, say the architect said, structural beam or architectural beam or something, at least then it's something accounted for. So the
yes,
contractor can say is like, agree with that, disagree. Like, is that kind of how you're hoping to see it?
like in the architectural drawings, if they point in and say structural beam, C structural, that's fine. I don't have a
Okay.
problem with that. But like on sometimes you get C architectural for dimensions. Well, then the dimensions aren't on the architectural.
Yeah.
So now I have no dimensions.
Yeah.
Or another big thing we see is grid lines shown on one plan, but then every plan past that, there's no grid lines.
Oh, that's odd. Yeah. You should always, yeah. Again,
It's not that hard to copy the grid lines to the next
I,
plan.
well, in this Revit too, like, and even one neat thing, like, because we had like if I found when I was doing kind of like high rises or like multifamily, right? Because you had your parquet grid lines basically, and then you had your first floor, and then you had, floors up to 1 to 6, or depending on how high you were going to go with the wood frame and that. And like the grid lines, I would show them on that first floor as well. And you could do that in Revit because you could pull the 3D extents and kind of bring it up there, because it was nice just to see on the first floor where the grid lines were basically at level one, and then the parquet, and then level two at that point doesn't matter, because technically when you've been building it, you've already got level one built, and then level two is
Right.
all about that. And you're right. Like, why not show it? Even if they're grayscale, why not bring it onto the plans?
Like I can get on a pretty good soapbox on the issues I want to see change.
See?
But
Well, this is what we're trying to do.
I don't
Go
want this
for
to be
it.
a really negative podcast. I love the industry,
Yeah.
but there are some things that I would like to see change, and a lot of it is probably drawing wise.
Yeah.
And we don't see this architecturally, but structurally, we get a lot of Section 7 on S 3.2 similar. But what's
Hmm.
similar? Like you go to it and you're
Yeah.
like, well, where 7 was cut, you had a joist. There's no joist in this section.
Yeah.
There's nothing similar here. But yet I'm supposed to go through and be able to figure out what you meant by similar.
Is it the
Or
path to
in
least resistant? What do you think? What do you think it is?
for not to be mean, but it almost seems like laziness.
Yeah. Well, path to resistance.
And you know, but and we get that, and then sometimes on sections it's like refer to this other section for the rest of the info, which
Right.
isn't that bad if it's one, but like I have on a job where I have refer to section D, refer to section A, refer to C on another sheet, and refer to F on another sheet. I have a picture with no information on it except for refer to these 4 different sections for information.
Right. So like, I guess the message for everyone that's listening to this right now is just do your due diligence, cut it through, invest the time, look it back, and double check your work. Is this actually a similar one? Is it? Does it have anything majorly different? Like you said, it's, well, the beam or the column or whatever the case is. Maybe it is different, and unfortunately, you just got to draw another detail.
Yeah, and it's like it's bad, not bad, but sometimes when you draw that detail, yeah, it takes a little more time.
Hmm.
But for us as still detailers, I always look at it from, if it takes me 30 minutes to do it in the office, it's saving 4 hours in the shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So from the engineering and architectural standpoint, if it's taking you guys 30 minutes to do it, it could solve 15 RFIs.
Yeah. And we did the numbers. An average RFI was something like $1,000 from an architectural. You know what I mean? Because it's
Yeah.
not just a simple thing. And like you mentioned the dimensions. Again, yeah, that's the thing. Like I was gonna kind of pop a question from my mind. I thought, is there too many dimensions on a plan? Is there a point where you're like, hold on, I know, I think I asked for dimensions, but I'm sorry, I opened up Pandora's box.
And like another thing, architecturally wise, dimensionally, what are we dimensioning to? Like
Hmm.
a lot of times I don't ever see a dimension coming from a grid line. So me trying to tie a wall to a grid line so I can find where another wall is sometimes becomes a challenge.
Yeah.
And then are we dimensioning to the drywall? Are we dimensioning to the stud? Are we, we've had some drawings that say all dimensions are to the stud. I'm like, oh, great. That's where I believe all the dimensions should go, because the drywall is not going to be there when you're building the wall.
Yeah.
You're going to build the stud and then you're going to slap the drywall on it.
Exactly.
But,
It's a
but then
finish.
I've
Yeah.
work on other ones where it's to the drywall, and it's like, okay, now I have to do the math to take off 5/8 drywall on both sides to
Hmm.
find out that that's a 6-inch stud. And it's all
Yeah.
part of my job, but it's also something that every detailer is going to complain about.
And that's, again, like, how can we help the architectural community and all that kind of stuff, especially someone new and they're listening to it. And you're right. And it's tough because a lot of guys haven't had, guys, gals haven't had the hands-on experience of building something, right? Like,
Right.
thankfully, like myself, grade 11, my summer, I walked out to a construction site and said, I want to build, I want a frame, give me whatever you can do. And that's when, like, it just emphasized. So like when I'm drawing a wall, I visually build the wall in my mind, and it's great in that sense. And then and then the following summer before I went to school, I worked at a millwork plant. So I got to, really have that passion. And I loved it. I love being hands-on and seeing that. Because when we draw all these millwork details, like it's one thing to draw everything and it's super. Oh, that looks easy. Well, the moment you go, I'm going to physically build this, and again, I'm speaking from experience. When I renovated my home, I built it, I mapped it out, I estimated, I went and got the materials, and then I started building it. And right away, you're just kind of like scratching your head, you're going, what? Where do I start and that kind of stuff? So there is a craft to it and seeing. And when you have that attention to detail and that mind's eye, like you said, when it comes to simple stuff like dimensions, you're doing it at the right place because you're thinking how the guy in the field is, how is he going to deal with this?
Yes. Like, I'm sure we've all heard draw it for the dumbest person you can think of.
Right.
And that's what I was told when I started. And I would
Yeah.
draw it like that. And then my boss finally came up to me and said, all right, think of somebody a little bit smarter.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So, and, finding that happy medium. But being in the industry so long, like when I started, was just a firm. We didn't have a
Mhm.
shop. So everything I was told was gospel. This is just how they do it. I don't know why they do it this way. This is how they do it. Then I had friends that went into the fabrication side. So I would start asking questions.
Yeah.
And then my next job was with the fabricator. So I'd go out in the shop and I would see how they're doing. So the way I started detailing is completely different than the way I detail now,
Yeah.
because I have the real world experience of being out there, having a shop foreman come into my office and chew me out because I made a mistake. And I'm just sitting there going, like I'm completely flabbergasted. I don't know what to say back. And he just walks off. And I'm like, and they're like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. Like,
Mhm.
but found out what was wrong. And in my head, I'm never making that mistake again. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be hollered at.
Oh yeah, and that's and you're right. Yeah, same thing. There's when I've made mistakes, and I've got defining moments in my brain that are all categorized in that sense. And yeah, you look back and you're like, I'm never going to do that again. And that's
Yeah.
good. I mean, like I saw again that construction job that I worked on and the framing, and their handbook basically said. It was, I don't remember anything about the handbook, but the last page was just very intrigued. It was a picture of one of I guess, the president up on the stage. And the theme was, you're allowed to make one mistake. We're all going to make mistakes. Just don't do it again. And that was
Right.
kind of the attitude for it. And that's, clearly it's resonated with you there, Adam. And you're not going to do the same. And vice versa. Like we had a couple extras on jobs and I was like, I'm never going to do this again. Or like I
Right.
told you about the extra layer of all the fire spray and everything. We had a straps. We just doubled up our studs even bigger, right? Because it was just, we never wanted to see it again. It's a shame that it happened, but we're human. We make mistakes. It's what you do with the mistakes afterwards is it really defines kind of going forward.
Yes. Like
Yeah.
I walk into buildings, I look up. That's just me. I look
Yeah.
at the still when I go in a building.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I look at stuff and I go, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. Or, oh, they shouldn't have done it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it worked. It's there.
Yep.
It's safe.
Yep.
Yeah, that weld looks horrible.
Mm-hmm.
But did they get enough penetration?
Yeah.
And that's what matters. We all work together. It for it takes a team to build a project.
Yeah.
So
100%.
all the way from the owner to the janitor sweeping the floor when the job's done. It
Yeah.
Nobody bringing anything extra value than anybody else to a job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you, if you read my LinkedIn post, my job's the most important one out of everybody. But the architect's going to say that, the engineer is going to say that.
Yeah.
We're all going to say that we're more important than the other person, but in reality, we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still detailers. We have to read all kinds of drawings, elevator, HVAC, architectural, all of them, the full spectrum. But
Yeah.
we are coordinated.
Yeah.
The architect and engineer coordinate and they get all the stuff. But then when it comes down to that detailed little part of it, it's in the name. We're still detailers. It's the detail part of it. We have to make sure all the bolts are in the right place. Everything fits through the joist. Everything. Does that beam need a big hole cut in it? And if we cut a hole in it, what do we need to do to make that beam to where it's not going to collapse when we put weight on it?
Yeah.
That was going to be an RFI that we're going to send off, because
Yep.
I can tell you that what it needs to be, but I can't prove that's what it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
After a while, you can look at a job and be like, oh, that beam connection is not going to work, because you've just seen thousands and thousands of connections.
Mm-hmm.
So when I see something that doesn't work, I'm going to RFI it.
Yep.
Or if something doesn't match, I'm going to RFI it.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of it is the eyeball test. If you go into a building and you see something that just looks bad, you think it's bad, but it could look good and still be bad, but it passes that eyeball test.
Right. It is the best. Yeah. And yet with the RFIs and going back a step, when you talked about that you were working with, structural engineers and architects early on and
Yes.
before kind of compiling, have you seen those? As I don't know if those jobs have matured at this point where, you can go back and be like, hey, we only got a third of the RFIs, or we got one RFI. Like, you got a kind of a track record on those examples, how it did
Uh,
work out better.
no, like when I was working at the engineering firm, we also had a detailing firm. So we weren't always working on that engineer's drawings. But when we did work on their drawings, we had no RFIs because
Right.
we could just walk down the hall and go, hey, what do you really mean by this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I still have friends that work there. And when I do see one of their jobs come across, I skip the RFI process.
Hmm.
I call my friend who drew the drawings and I'm like, hey, what do you really mean by this? And then I send an
Right.
RFI out or an email out saying, hey, I spoke with this person at this firm and this is what we just, came up with.
Yeah.
That is going to be, in my opinion, the key to getting rid of RFIs is communication. Let me
100%.
speak to who is in charge of not in charge of the job, but who did the drawings. Let me talk to that person.
Hmm. Yeah.
So
Especially like you said, if you can get it early on before it becomes, a contract, because that's the thing when it becomes a contract, and then if you have to go through that system, well, then yeah, because that's why the RFI is being
yes,
triggered. But if you can
and we
get
can get
before that,
around the gatekeeping some. It's
yeah,
not. I call the GC and I go, "Hey, can I call the engineer?" And some will be like, "Yeah, go right ahead." Some will be like, "No, everything has to go through us." I've
hmm
worked on one job where the engineer called me, skipped the GC. The engineers directly called me and was like,
yeah,
"Can we talk about these things?" And I'm like, "I would be happy to."
yeah,
And that engineer, like, if somebody was to ask me about her, I would tell them one of the best engineers I've ever worked with.
yeah.
Once we got kind of kicked the GC out of the picture a little bit, everything just went so smooth. And the GC wasn't a problem. It was just we took out that layer so we could get
Mhm.
this done quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked with one structural. It was didn't like, they would, the contractors issuing RFIs basically where it's coming from you in that case. And they were just very, it's on the drawings, very stubborn about it. It was frustrating. And it's just like, just give them a call and find out. And then they ended up doing the call and they got everything resolved over that call. And I was like, oh,
Right.
great. That's
And
awesome. Right. And then that saves everyone time. It saves me as the CRP, the one I have to deal with the RFIs, but it has nothing to do with me, but it's going between, I'm the middleman trying, again, that gatekeeper to control it and coordinate it. And it's just another thing. If we can just kind of eliminate and work together, and communication's key, you got it.
yeah, I have a friend that every job that he does, that his company does, they go through the drawings, maybe a week going through the drawings, mark them all up, and then they contact their customers like, can we have a video meeting with you, the engineer, the architect?
Hmm.
Let's just get everybody in here and we're going to go over what we do. They use Bluebeam to
Yep.
where they can show it everywhere and he can, all right, so here's our question. And then he will type it so they can see what he's saying, like so everybody can see his responses, and then he forwards that marked up drawing out to everybody so everybody has a copy of it. And he's like,
Makes
it
sense.
solves so many problems just being able to do that.
Right. So yeah, exactly. You're screen sharing, you're doing your stuff, you're showing the challenges and the frustrations and where, this needs to be resolved.
Yeah, like the technology we have nowadays, there's so much we can do with just screen sharing.
Yeah.
Like here's when I make an RFI, I don't redraw everything. I use Bluebeam. I
Hmm.
clip the part I need so I can just mark it up. So I go, this is your drawing. You can see what you did and what I'm questioning.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
100%.
that's a big thing. And I think even the way we ask RFIs need to be done in a specific way. Like if I see your connection is not going to work, I don't want to just send an RFI that says, hey, this connection doesn't work. Please advise. I want to send a
Hmm.
question that says, your connection doesn't work for this reason.
Hmm.
How about we do it this way? That way
Yeah.
you can look at what I think and go, oh, yeah, that will work. Let's follow your way. Because I know what's going to work in the field. I know what's going to work in the shop because I've dealt with all that and I can, that's part of, once again, the still detailer's job is to know that stuff. So if I can push a solution that will work and everybody's happy with, why wouldn't I do that?
No, I appreciate that. Like that's exactly what we'd say to the GCs. Like, don't just come to a problem, like bring a couple ideas and we'll brainstorm, we'll work together. Maybe we're on site, we'll walk around and, kind of stand around and stare but we'll come up to the resolution. And you're right. And again, it's all about being proactive. The more proactive that you can be with this stuff, the better it's going to flow, the better the communication is going to go. And then at the end of the day, we can all celebrate because we did an amazing project together.
Yeah. And, the thing with doing it that way is I ask the question that way. I go ahead and do what I said that I wanted to do, and I'm continuing to work. So when I get the answer back that says, yes, that's great, I don't have to jump back to that part to finish it. I already did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because one, I did it that way so I could actually get a snapshot of my model and send that so I can go, hey, look, I want to do it this way. That way you can see all the beams, not in a 2D version. I'm going to send you, we can send a 3D RFI out of our software, the SDS2 software. I don't know if the other ones do this. They probably do, but to where I can send it to you and you can spin it around and you can see everything in it in a 3D picture. Instead of just going, okay, I'm looking at your 2D flat image. No, spin it around. Let's see what it all looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, absolutely. I think you nailed it. And that's, 100%. I think this has been awesome. And, we're coming up to the hour here, Adam, in that sense. But yeah, key takeaways, I think dimensions, communication. What are your final takeaways? What's your soapbox moment here? You got 30 seconds. What does the industry need to hear to be better at this?
Well, if you look at any of my LinkedIn posts, I have a hashtag on there that says work better together. That's pretty much it. We all got to work better together. I'm still going to complain about you. You're going to complain about me. But we just need to work better together.
Hashtag work better together. That's awesome. That is really cool. Let's see an uptick of that and people tagging that because, yeah, I think that's absolutely, I love it. No, thank you so much for being on the show.
No
where
problem,
can we
dude.
find you, Adam? Like you mentioned LinkedIn, but where can we,
LinkedIn is probably going to be my biggest one. Like that's where I share everything. I'm on Facebook, but I don't ever get on Facebook. I don't use Instagram, TikTok, any of that stuff.
Yeah.
I like to share the stuff on LinkedIn, and I have been contemplating YouTube to share how-to videos, but I haven't delved into that yet. So if you're wanting to get a hold of me, LinkedIn would be the best. It's just my name. You should see a picture of me.
Yeah. So. That's awesome. And I'll post it on the site and post it on the description and all that stuff. So we'll definitely check it out. And I'm expecting to see that YouTube channel request and check it out in the future. But no, again, thank you so much for being on this. This was awesome. This definitely even gave me some insight of kind of the whole process and kind of what happens behind the scenes. And I'm sure for listeners that this really opened up their eyes of just how steel detailing works and the challenges that it face and what we see at site. And again, let's try and start eliminating this at the beginning. If we can get this all wrapped up, we're not going to have surprises on the site because we don't ever want to be surprised in that sense.
Right.
So,
and I hope that this informs people a little bit more of what steel detailing is. It's kind of dying trade because, well, nobody knows what it is and it's not taught in schools. So if somebody sees it and is like, hey, that sounds like it's fun, contact me. I have a lot of networking that if you want to be a detailer, I can probably help you out becoming one.
Oh, that's awesome. No, and appreciate how you're giving back to the community in that sense. And absolutely 100%. So yeah, well, that kind of wraps up this show here. Architects, keep designing, and contractors, keep making those blueprints reality. We'll see you on the next one.